by the hell, so.
Did you get a good supplemental plan?
Yeah, saves the county a whole bunch of money, so.
Yeah, but it just, now that makes more sense.
No, I understand.
It's just one.
There's
Well,
the other things.
Well,
Yeah.
Everyone supports. Men's health, it's all- it's hard.
So,
Yeah.
Really? Huh? That's kind of a
No, it's
no-brainer.
home in a ditch. Can't be able to- Somewhere cold and there's no heat.
Alrighty. All right, we'll call the meeting to order,
I read the minutes of March 28th.
28th, right? There's no.
I was just saying, okay.
There's no.
I can approve the
It's
minutes. All
It's in draft.
right, so I can approve the minutes of March 28th.
second,
Okay, any members of changes to the
No.
minutes? All those in favor of adoption, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, vote unanimous. We've got a request for a proclamation for Men's Health, Month.
Can I mention, I'm sorry, one thing, Mr. Chairman, on the minutes of the 28th?
Yeah.
You'll see an expanded version of the non-public session.
Mhm.
The new right to know law, that Tom Velarde was kind enough to send to me from the Attorney General's office. Requires some additional information, on the non-public minutes. Now, that doesn't mean you need to make them public.
Right,
It only says that you have to look at it once every 10 years to decide whether to make it public or not.
Yeah,
So
I
my point is, I've put
Put that in there.
I've put expanded information on the non-public session.
okay,
Based on my reading of the new Attorney General's right to know law. 120 something pages.
all right.
Well, I
Okay.
think somebody can't write something in 10 pages anymore.
And all right, then we'll move to item 2, which is the proclamation for Men's Health Month.
I put it on the agenda, Mr. Chairman. I just didn't, it was a request that we've gotten, out of Washington for Men's Health Month to encourage men for,
Yeah.
to do certain testing and things. So what,
Yeah, I'm all for it.
I just wanted to say that, we'd honor the same thing for Women's Health Month.
Yeah, right.
And he
Yes.
just happened to be the month that this comes up in.
Okay, I don't think Deanna's in favor of this, though. Huh?
Let me think.
Well, so the chair will accept the motion to,
I'll make the motion.
Second.
to declare Men's Health Month in June of 2024. All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adoption of the proclamation, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, vote unanimous. Okay, you guys can sign this right here, another right here. There you go. We'll ship that off to them. All right, item 3 is a Willan summary report and possible next steps. The commission has received the summary report last night at 9 o'clock, so we haven't even had a chance to even go over it yet. So, Tori, if you want to just talk briefly regarding it, of course, all this information is going to be compiled with the financial reports that we need, and then I'm going to ship it off to them as the city manager, so.
Sure. So the summary report was provided to the vendor on Monday, so I apologize that it didn't come to you
Yeah.
until last night. And I have not seen the financial component.
Right.
That was not my,
We're honestly, we're just working on that. Diane and I were just working on that
Okay.
this week.
all right.
And we haven't completed it.
So you did not get this until yesterday.
Last night at 9 o'clock. Yeah,
Um,
in fact, I can tell you because it came,
yeah,
and when it comes on my phone at 9 o'clock, it's really hard to read. Because of the fact that it's built on expanded paper,
yes,
I printed it this morning, for it to come out on little sheets. But,
Yeah.
but the truth of it is, it's made to print out on 11 by 7
Big
sheet.
sheet,
Oh.
which Deanna was able to do. for us.
okay. So there are two files that have been provided, and I think you've got them both. One is the basic PowerPoint, and one is the annotated, which looks like this with essentially the answers to the questions you're likely to ask. And if you haven't seen that, then that would be, I think, Bob, it looks like you've got it, yeah. So,
it was on the desk.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Janet printed it this morning.
yeah.
Did you? Oh, I must have not grabbed it then.
So it probably makes sense to to give you an opportunity to review them. It's essentially an after-action summary of the use and impact that the warming center had. A quick review is, they were open for 89 nights. They saw 307 unique individuals, which is more than double the number of unique individuals that have ever been seen there. It is the same thing, but it's got notes. It's got kind of the answers to questions that people have usually asked. The biggest takeaways are that there were no deaths caused by exposure during the Willand activation period. That is the goal of the program, is to make sure no one experiences a weather-related fatality. There were no overdose deaths on site during the activation period, which is another goal. Essentially, there were no deaths. There were 2 outside deaths during the activation period that were not related to the Willand Warming Center, and they were initially determined to be substance use related. But there were no deaths at the center or from any cause. It's, I think, important to also note that the vast majority of the folks who presented were from the Strafford County area. It was over 96% of the participants reported that they were from Strafford County. There were 2% of the folks who said they came from outside of Strafford County, and the majority of those folks were from Rockingham County. And that's primarily because they have been banned from Crossroads House. So they're usually part of a trade and exchange program. Crossroads House also had an emergency warming center that saw much fewer, many fewer people. I think they maxed at 14 or 15. There was also Operation Blessing offering a 11-bed overnight shelter available across the parking lot from Crossroads House. So folks had some options. Crossroads House did tend to pull folks from their emergency shelter into their general shelter. So if we felt that there was someone who was a great candidate for Crossroads House, if they were already on the waiting list, there was sometimes an effort to transport them to the overnight emergency shelter at Crossroads, because that automatically elevated their name in preference to get into the general shelter. So there was quite a bit of communication between all of those shelters. Yes, sir.
Could I just ask a quick question,
Yeah.
Terry? I just want to make it clear that while there was 2% in Wheeland from out of the county, there was probably more than that from Strafford County in Crossroads.
Oh, absolutely. It's close to, it's over 40%
So
of folks
what-
in their general shelter.
right,
Yeah.
so what I'm saying is,
Yep.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that
2%.
that 2% is, it's a hell of a deal for the county.
Yes, it's
In
a
the
very,
sense that
yeah.
we'd be happy to take their 2% if they take our 40%.
Yes, exactly. Yep. So distribution from within Strafford County is pretty much as you'd expect. About a third of the folks reported that they had most recently stayed in Dover, 44% in the greater Rochester area, which includes Farmington, Milton and North, and then about 20% of the time folks said they'd stayed in Somersworth. It's a tough thing to nail down because we're asking folks, where did you stay most often during the last 30 days when you weren't at the warming center? So there aren't many places where folks who are unsheltered are going to stay outside of those areas because the transportation infrastructure exists within, and most of their services exist within that infrastructure. And that is the 30-day look back is the same timeframe that welfare offices use. So if someone presents to a city welfare office, they will say, where have you been living for the last, within the last 30 days? For example, there was someone who presented to a Merrimack welfare office, said they had lived in Rochester Rochester reimbursed Merrimack for expenses related to that person's stay in Merrimack, and that's vice versa. That happens, you know, as kind of their the way they work. So one of the things that was new this year, there were over 80 people that got a very comprehensive assessment of need for care coordination. You've got a copy of that tool, the Arizona Self-Sufficiency scale, in your packet. And over 100 people completed the release of information for the community care team, which has you also have that release in your packet. It has over 60 organizations who have signed on for verbal exchange of information to facilitate care coordination. Those meetings happen monthly, and they have, since Willand began, been happening daily as well. With a much smaller concentrated group that focuses primarily on the Willand folks who need care coordination. CAP has been hosting those calls, and since Willand closed, those calls have moved to 3 times a week. So there is quite a bit of care coordination going on. I think you'll see when you get a chance to look through the numbers, the impact that folks had. They made over 1,000 referrals. Many of them were to substance use disorder partners. There were folks that went to treatment. There were transportation was provided to the emergency room, to both the HCA, the standalone emergency room, and the Wentworth Douglas emergency room. The Greater Seacoast Community Health mobile van was there weekly during activation, sometimes twice a week. Volunteers in Medicine was on site with a provider who did actual procedures and handing out prescription antibiotics for many of the conditions that she assessed, anything from a tooth abscess to an ear infection to trench foot. And she did not distribute any narcotics or painkillers. It was antibiotics. And all of those services ended up in the discussions around who do we need to follow up with. So a number of transfers, very few folks were banned. There was only one banned for the duration of the period, and that was related to some law enforcement action that was independent of Willand, but in discussion with the Somersworth PD, it made sense to not let that person back on the property. And that seemed to continue to be a pretty effective strategy where folks would get basically take a break, for anywhere from 2 hours to 48 hours. And then they would need to meet with the operators before they were able to come back in. So there were, there are 2 sets of numbers that we can provide between around what the number of calls for service from police and fire. Those 2 sets are because the Willand team has a set of the numbers that they captured based on calls they made for service. And the city has a number that matches calls anybody made for service to the site. So Willand called the police fewer than 20 times, the staff, but there were participants who called just as they would, someone yelled at me, someone stole my sleeping bag, someone, So I think you will find in conversation with the leadership from the first responders and the police that they were very happy with the partnership, the communication, and the need for response there. The Dover PD, Dover Fire did do a walkthrough of the property this week and found that they were very satisfied with the condition it was left in. So in a nutshell, I think the vendor met the expectations of the RFP, and they continue to look at ways to keep the care coordination moving, because there really are, as I'm sure Carrie can speak to, a handful of folks that are high intensity users and have a tremendous impact on city services.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna forward this, as soon as we get the financial piece finished, I'm gonna forward all this to the mayors and city managers and figure out what they want to do, what the next step would be with them.
Yep.
That's kind of where it's really their decision. But if you did a nice job and make putting the summary together.
Yeah.
You know, and sort of read downstairs with keeping an active count on what's going on. Do you have any idea how many of those folks are mentally ill?
Most of them.
Most of them?
Yeah, so I would say most of them have co-occurring mental
Oh,
health
therapy, yeah.
disease with their, with substance use component. There are some folks who are in recovery, and may have, you know, like there's one woman who had actually been a county employee for over 20 years. She retired and went to work as a kind of live-in housekeeper for a local family. She went to visit her adult child in New York after her grandchild was born, and when she came back, the house had been sold and the people had moved. So she had no notice and she had no housing. So she had no substance use history and no mental illness. But she was stuck. Yeah, so that is one end of the continuum. The other end is folks who have been in and out of shelters and not been able to get the consistent care that they need to be able to stay housed. So the goal, you know, there are a couple discussions in the works. Carly's home team is working with a Rochester landlord to procure a building that will allow them to do some care coordination out of that building and eventually do some supportive housing, which is the piece of Crossroads House that makes it most successful. Folks are in the general shelter, they get help to be rent ready, and then they get moved into apartments, you know,
Right.
with ongoing support.
Right.
You know, and sometimes that ongoing support is their permanent, and sometimes there's another move when they're really self-sufficient and everyone's confident that they've got the tools and skills they need to stay in independent housing. So that is one of the things we don't have in Strafford County is a pathway to that supportive housing. So that's why Carly's home team was initially conceived. So that's the area that they're returning to focus in, is finding space where they can do that supportive housing. So folks who come out of Home for Now, come out of My Friend's Place, can have that kind of supported ongoing assistance. The biggest needs, again, IDs, birth certificates, access to food, aside from housing, that's kind of self-evident, but the welfare agencies have been tremendously engaged and really, really working well together. So I think there's a new strength in that care coordination space that we've been building for 10 years, that the IDN really tried to accelerate. So that proposal to do some more work in the supportive housing space is moving forward. And there is also, you know, we also have some recommendations for other next steps. The state's looking at funding care coordination hubs similar to the doorways, where the doorway provides access and assessment to help you figure out where's the next best place. The state would like to see something similar to that for housing supports. So there's an opportunity to build that out here. Same with medical respite. We continue to have conversations about that need because a number of the folks at Willand were medically frail or compromised, and that was really challenging. Especially folks on oxygen, folks in wheelchairs, folks with functional mobility challenges that they, you know, have amputations, and building out the food security network. So there are some numbers that have been put together for that, and I think it would be really a great next step if after the city managers and mayors can review the performance report, we can start that conversation about ideas for how to move forward, because there is some state funding available for some of these. I just really think it's important to continue the care coordination piece, because that is truly what's keeping folks out of the emergency rooms. I'd like to say out of jail, but we know that's not, you know, 100% foolproof. But at least keeping them accountable if they do go to jail, so that they don't rack up fines and fees and warrants and things like that. So very good, I think, return on the investment.
Right. Okay. You guys have any questions?
No, thank you.
Well, okay. Thanks, Laurie.
Yeah.
I'll be reaching out as soon as I get.
Yeah.
Get the rest of the stuff together. I don't.
Oh, yeah, I'll read this over the weekend
Yes.
but yeah, it came in at 9 o'clock last night.
Okay. All good. All that information is important as to what they want to do, if anything.
Right.
Moving
Right.
forward.
Yeah. There was a community conversation, I think, 3 weeks ago at Frisbee,
Right.
to kind of share some of the findings to that point, because the expectation was that Welland would be closed on April 1st, but then there was some really severe weather, so they had some out of contract activations. So the numbers have been updated to reflect that, but we did have police chiefs and mayors and folks participating in that. So it's not the first time that they will have heard some of this information. It's just helpful for them, I think, to see it presented wholly and with the explanations that answer a lot of the questions that folks ask when they just see the slides.
Okay.
And if you have any other questions or recommendations after looking at the summary that you think would be helpful to include, let me know.
Great. All right. Thanks, Tori.
Yeah,
We'll see you again soon.
yeah.
Nice job on that, by the way. You're about the only one that could do it.
Well, the timing was good. I have a new job now, so we'll
Yeah.
see. See how much time I have, for
You
here.
know,
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank
it's
you.
the answer to all these things has always been a single point of entry system.
That is it. Yep.
That's all it boils down to. You gotta have that because it saves money. It saves resources, it focuses resources, it does all the things that
Yeah.
you and I have talked about for.
Well, we're standing connections for health backup, so hopefully,
Right.
that will be an option.
What will you be doing for the state, Tom? If you don't mind.
No, it's not, I'm not specifically a state employee. I'm the new interim executive director for the Public Health Association, the New Hampshire Public Health Association.
Congratulations.
Thanks, yeah.
All right. Well, we got item 4, we got some stuff coming up, we got our TAN meetings, we're gonna have to borrow some money soon. All right, any questions regarding the upcoming events?
No.
No? Old or new business?
No.
Any old or new business? All right. Questions or comments related to the agenda? That's you, Susan, if you want to say something.
Well, newspaper was blasted again with your lawsuit. And I guess my question is, are the three of you suing as individual people, or are you
Yes.
suing on behalf of being commissioners?
It's privately funded.
Okay, and do you,
I'm like Trump. I probably fund suits. That's what I do. You know?
It's-
Yeah.
so, do you feel that it is? I read the article in Foster's a couple of times, and that's what precipitated the question. Because I really feel, and this is just my 2 cents worth, you can tell me to go crap in my hat, that if you're speaking to the press, that maybe you should make it very clear that you are privately funding and that you're suing as individual private citizens, and try to refrain from using your commissioner title.
Well, all I can tell you is that I have a right as an individual to sue anybody I want.
And I agree with that 100%.
So I'm not using my commissioner title. The bottom line is I don't agree with what the legislature did. And I'm gonna take whatever legal action I can privately to address it. And it's not any more complicated than that. And I do believe that they disenfranchised 90,000 voters, and I believe that that's the facts. And I also believe that they champion the Constitution only when it suits their purpose. Pretty simple.
Well, thank you for the commentary. I didn't ask for the commentary, but thank you for the commentary.
Well, that's my response to your question.
No, the question was, were you suing as individual people. And I just made a comment that I asked you if you're gonna, when you represent yourself within this lawsuit in the public arena, be it newspapers or whatever, that you make that clarification that you're suing as private individuals. And in no way am I disparaging your rights, because if anybody knows me, I respect you for taking that challenge on. Might disagree with you, but I respect the fact that you do it, and just, make it clear that you're doing it as private individuals.
Unfortunately, we can't always be responsible for what the paper writes.
Right, right.
But you can make that clarification when you,
I've made a lot of clarifications that they don't print. Right?
Well, they print incorrectly.
They print it incorrectly, or they print whatever they want,
Yeah.
so, I don't have an issue with that. But it's really none of their business. That's what it boils down
thank you for your opinion.
to. It's not my opinion, it's just the facts, it's just, I'm suing privately, so it doesn't matter. I have a right to do so, and I'm doing so. That's it. Okay, you got any other questions regarding this other stuff?
Are we able to get copies of it at some point?
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah.
Right now, before
And
you
I
leave,
think at the last meeting, you were gonna give me some stuff that you went into non-public, and I know that that was a long meeting. We kind of got into this little bit of a debate. And so
Well, I thought
what were we talking about? You had some information on the county nursing home that you were going to give me, and I think it had to do with EGA maybe, and their proposal.
let me give you a copy of that. Yeah,
Appreciate it.
we can give that.
Sure.
Why don't we give them what we sent to the delegate?
Yeah, well-
Oh, that's my other question.
What we sent to the delegate.
we'll forward to you what we sent to the delegation.
We sent that this week to the delegation.
Oh, that was, you guys were gonna send the third letter, and so that did get sent
Yep,
this week?
we'll get that all to you now, but, I actually asked Janet just to email it to you if that's
Just, yeah,
convenient.
that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Alrighty. Item 7, is the moving of non-public for personnel issues and legal contracts. Second? Okay, roll call, Commissioner Watson, Commissioner Rolo,
Yes.
myself, yes, okay. Vote unanimous, Commissioner Rolo is aye, the executive session.
And, Janet, that the lengthwise ones that you did through the commissioners, it's easier to read than mine on this.
Yeah, give her this one.
Just give her George's and then you can,
I'll get another one.
that way we won't hold you up while we're printing. Mine's too, I printed mine this morning, but it's on a smaller paper.
How can I get that stuff to you? It's in my car. I want to get rid of it.
I'll get it right now. Dougie,
Could
could you do me a favor?
You wanna have that as well?
It's like something I'll do. I know, but I don't in the morning and you can't sleep.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's the kill the cat.
Good, I'm telling you.
Is her mama like that?
Yes, very much so. It's a strong one. Yeah. In her, I used to be able to buy her.